Shalom, greetings from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Essen, and this is TV7's Editor's Note. Today we're going to discuss a couple of significant events that occurred over the last 72 hours. To start, of course, with the heinous attack that occurred in Australia, 16 murdered, at least 16 murdered, and dozens of others wounded. This could have been prevented. Unfortunately, the leadership there has not been of help to prevent and even fueled the anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish sentiments in Australia. Next to that, regrettably, two Iowa National Guardsmen have been killed, as well as their local interpreter in Syria. What does that mean for the US-Syria relations? Of course, the Damascus regime claims innocence of any responsibility. The situation vis-a-vis Lebanon, the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, is continuing its efforts to rearm. What is Israel going to do about that? And what is the viability of President Trump's 20-point plan vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip at a time when Hamas refuses to disarm? All of that and more. Let's introduce our expert for today, Brigadier General in Reserve, Yossi Kuperwasser, formerly the Director General of the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs, head of the IDF Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Division, and currently the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. It's good to have you here, General.
It's great to be with you again.
You know, we should start with wishing a happy Hanukkah. 1 week before Christmas, of course, so I do always look forward to this season. These happen to be two of my favorite holidays, with a single favorite message of light overwhelming darkness. But unfortunately, this year we saw much darkness prevail, and it is rooted predominantly out of the prerequisite or the essence of when men or women who are looking to bring about as much as good as possible for their peoples come to a point of inaction, evil prevails.
Yeah, what happened in Australia, which is not only in Australia, when it happened, it starks everybody that it happened so horrifically in Australia, with 16 people killed. But we saw something similar in Manchester not long ago, and we saw something similar in Washington not long ago, and in Pittsburgh beforehand, and so on and so forth. So there's a wave of anti-Semitism that is spreading all over the West, and much of it is a result of the inaction of the leaders of the West, where they don't take the necessary steps in order to stop it. And not only that they don't do that, in many of the cases, and Albanese in Australia is a case to look at, is they are actually fueling this trend by not doing anything to stop it, and speaking about Israel as the evil side and what's happening in the Middle East, and rewarding the terrorists by recognizing a Palestinian state that doesn't exist, just in order to appease the radicals in the Middle East and in their constituencies in Australia and elsewhere. So this, of course, and you know, you look at the demonstrations that took place still take place in Australia against Israel, and nothing is being done in spite of the fact that people shout slogans calling for gassing the Jews. Nothing is being done about it. And it's unbelievable. And there's a series of terror attacks against Jews in Australia, and nothing has been done beyond taking steps against the IRGC, but not enough protection, not enough intelligence activity, not enough arrests of people that are involved in that, not enough in-depth effort to learn how this process of radicalization takes place in order to stop it in the early stages, not wait until it reaches that kind of terror attack. And worst of all, not enough steps to protect the gatherings of Jews where they take place. I mean, this one event that took place yesterday was known in advance, and everybody knew that it is going to happen in an open space, very vulnerable facility, and with many Jews targets for those who want to take action like the one carried out. And when you look at the kind of security that was there, it was definitely inadequate. And that's how these terrorists were able to shoot at the crowd for something like 10 minutes. And it's really unbelievable. And if it was not for the courage of one Muslim, who should be praised, who took care of one of the assailants, the results could have been even worse. And that's really freaking me out, I must say, when I look at what's happened, because the writing was on the wall in bright letters. It wasn't difficult to know what's going to happen. And Israel cooperates with the Australians with information about potential terror attacks. And when we give the information, they do what needs to be done. But they could have done much more on their own behalf without waiting for us to bring them information about what's going to happen in Australia. These people that were going through radicalization were supposed to be known to the security forces in Australia, and something should have been done about them. So there's a lot of open questions here. But more important than the open questions is to the importance of not repeating the same mistakes. And yes, right now everybody is taking severe measures to protect the Hanukkah ceremonies around the globe. But this should be kept beyond Hanukkah. And we should be on the tip of our toes for a long time, because this wave is going to produce many more would-be terrorists. This is how it works. There's a hate and indoctrination that goes on with the permission of the governments and with the support of the governments from time to time. And once you have this kind of hate and indoctrination, of course, eventually there are going to be some people who are going to translate it into action.
This horrendous attack obviously claimed the lives of more than a dozen people. There was also somebody wounded that we know, who's very active also in support of Israel. But I see this, and it's, again, when good men and women do nothing, bad things happen.
The case here is not that they did nothing; they worsened the situation.
Right. So it is a point where I'm not sure if it's it's pure evil to see those type of people who get into power and are really fueling the threats to their own societies. They are in the seats of power. They are supposed to take care of the people. And this goes, by the way, not only in Australia. This goes, as you mentioned, Manchester, in the UK. All those illegal Islamist migrants that are coming in unvetted, many of them with ties to terrorist organizations. And you see the number of people who came back from Syria or Iraq who were members of the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda and are known by the intelligence agencies. There are thousands roaming the streets. The intelligence agencies can't cover everything they do. And those threats are merely a few compared to what we see, Germany, every year, the Christmas market. We see ramming attacks almost every year. And we're seeing those attacks. The last time was a Saudi man, the time before that it was a Pakistani man, and all of them have the same ideological aspirations.
Sure. I think that what we saw here, we have to wait until the investigation is over to really find out what happened. Whether there was any country involved, on maybe the Iranians or maybe the Muslim Brotherhood or whatever, or ISIS, right. Whatever. We have to wait and see what are the results. But it seems as if at least one of the terrorists was a father and son. The son was radicalized in Australia. He wasn't coming as a radical, so vetting is very challenging, and things have to be done against homegrown terrorists who are radicalized at home in the West.
in mosques
Yes, and I
where
think,
they get their
of
education.
course, and
Yeah.
I think that what the Americans are starting to do is recognizing the Muslim Brotherhood as a terror organization is a first important step in the right direction.
Well, it was very much watered down, unfortunately.
Yes, but at least the first step. It's
a first
step
step.
in the right direction.
I agree.
What they did in Florida and in Texas is one step farther in this direction.
Yeah.
And we start to understand that we have to cope with the homegrown terrorists as well. It's not only those who are coming as a terrorist, as a would-be terrorist, that we have to vet before they arrive. But some of them are radicalized at home. And this radicalization is fueled, as you said, by the rewarding of terror and by not doing anything. I mean, these people were not working in the dark. The demonstrations in Australia were on the bridge, so everybody could have seen them. And I don't know that anything was done against the leaders of these demonstrations. On the contrary, they were allowed to go on with that for a long time.
Yeah.
That's a brainwashing of hatred and preparedness. When they speak about globalizing the Intifada, this is what it ends up with.
And you see the people chanting in the streets of Dallas, Texas, and Michigan it's horrendous to see what's happening there. They're saying, we're American, we can say whatever we want.
Yeah.
And that really...
There is a freedom of speech, but not a freedom to incite.
That is not speech. That's not in the category of freedom of speech. It shouldn't be.
This is incitement.
Right.
This is
Right.
incitement. This is
Yeah.
hate indoctrination combined with incitement. And this should be dealt with by the governments.
Rooted out. Let's move to another painful event. On Saturday, there was an attempt by the United States, as part of the directives granted to Central Command in Washington, to integrate the Syrian internal security services into Operation Inherent Resolve. As part of that, they have engaged in multiple so-called counter-ISIS operations. We do see that the imams and the religious leaders of the government that are supportive of the government are saying that this is something that cannot be. They cannot be part of Operation Inherent Resolve, which fundamentally goes against their own Islamic beliefs. And unfortunately, despite, the writing was on the wall, if I may call it that, we see that one member of the Damascus security forces blows himself up and murders 2 American service members from the Iowa National Guard, their interpreter. And I am fearful that this is only the beginning. Since you cannot vet people who were in Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, what are you going to vet them about?
Yeah.
What are we to take out of that? And how can we tell our American allies and friends that what you're doing in Damascus, you're playing with fire?
They are playing with fire, of course, because many of the people in the ranks of the Syrian security forces of President Shara are jihadists.
Including Shara himself.
I wouldn't say they are ex-jihadists. They are still jihadists.
Right.
And so you cannot trust them. We say trust and verify, but there's nothing to verify here. They are jihadists,
right,
and you cannot trust them. And some of them will be willing maybe to operate against ISIS because this is even a farther version of radicalism that they are opposing. But most of them will have second thoughts about it. And, this entire game that Shara is playing is based on his wish to have American support in reconstructing Syria, but it doesn't reflect a change in ideology.
Right.
The way political Islam looks at this matter is that when you are facing a stronger enemy, and when you are in a state of weakness, you should be patient and wait until you are stronger and then do what needs to be done. And this is exactly the logic of what Shara is doing.
Temporary convenience.
Temporary convenience is not did not come to the conclusion that Islam should cooperate with Christianity and that President Trump is a noble person and he should cooperate with him. No, President Trump is an infidel. They have to. We all have to remember that. And we cooperate with the infidels when it's convenient. But once we become strong again, we should do what needs to be done. And of course, even Shara cannot control each and every person inside these jihadists. And they criticizing day in, day out. They're not very happy with this policy. Some of them think that he went too far. And those who think so will not cooperate with this idea of fighting ISIS or fighting Al-Qaeda. And that's what we have seen in this case, and it may repeat itself. We have to be very cautious.
What amazes me is to hear President Trump say, it's not the government. It's not, Ahmed Shah. No, they're good people, and they're helping us. And I look at that.
He's right. It's not the government, but within the government there are so many people like that.
Well, what is the government
if not its people? Where does the government start and when it ends?
Exactly.
Where it ends.
What is the government if not its people? And more than that, when you look at what they're actually doing, it's very similar to Idlib. It's infighting. It is consolidating their power at the expense of other jihadist organizations, and it's a power struggle within those confinements of radical Wahhabism within Syria today.
We, by the way, in Israel, we were warning about that all along the way.
From day one.
We said we have to be very cautious and not fall in the trap that is laid in front of us.
No.
But the Americans really want to see the stabilization of Syria. And Shara, for the time being, proposes to help in doing that. And there's no alternative. So the Americans, I can understand them. They chose it, but...
they did it for the Turks and for the Saudis.
For the Turks, for themselves. They want also to see stabilize the Middle East and stabilize Syria. And Syria under Shah is not going to cooperate with the Iranians, they hope. And
True.
It's another thing that makes them encourage them to cooperate with the Shah. But while doing all of that and making the best out of what Shah proposes, you have to remember, these are jihadists. Many of the people in the security forces are jihadists. And in key positions in the government, there are many jihadists. And we have to bear that in mind. So when you play with fire, you should take all kinds of precautions.
And let's not forget also what President Shah said at the Doha conference. When he said, when I was in Al-Qaeda or ISIS, I wasn't a terrorist. I did not target civilians, which is a blatant lie. But nonetheless, that's what he was telling. He said, no, those who killed 60,000 civilians in Gaza are the Israelis. He insinuated to Israel. And he went as far as to say, and those who attacked the innocent in Afghanistan and Iraq, namely the Americans, they're the terrorists.
Yeah.
And yet you didn't really hear anything coming out from Washington about this. And in my conversations with my friends in the administration and outside of the administration, they all said to me, they didn't really know what to say.
We don't learn from history. That's more or less the same thing that happened in Afghanistan in the days of the Russian control,
Exactly.
when we supported Al-Qaeda at the time. And ended up with 9/11. So fortunately, until now, we don't have something of the same magnitude, but 3 people were killed.
3 people were killed, and I really hope and pray that our American friends will wake up, because this is really dangerous. Again, they're playing with fire. Now, you refer to one of the hopes of within the risk assessments, that the strategic value here is blocking the Iranian crescent. But Hezbollah continues to bolster itself in Lebanon. And there have been meetings here in Jerusalem about what to do with Hezbollah, considering the fact that we do not want to harm the state of Lebanon. We have a keen interest to normalize relations with them and to make Lebanon and Israel sisterly nations, so to speak. But Hezbollah is still there. It's strong, and its power is getting rehabilitated to the point of yet again posing some type of threat. And very soon we will see the Iranian foreign minister, Al-Akshi, coming to Lebanon to discuss the rehabilitation of Hezbollah. What needs to be done?
Well, I think what needs to be done is to put more pressure on Hezbollah, and that's what Israel is doing. We are escalating our activities in Lebanon to curb down the pace with which Hezbollah is building its capabilities or rebuilding its capabilities. And we have on that the American support. And we have to remember the Lebanese forces and the Lebanese government do not believe that they have enough power in order to deal with the problem by themselves. Although they realize that they have to, but they feel that they don't have enough power. And that's why they refrain from doing it. And we have to weaken Hezbollah more and more so that, and to strengthen the Lebanese armed forces to some extent, so that the balance is going to be such that even the Lebanese will believe that they can do that. It's not going to happen until the end of the year. They're not going to disarm Hezbollah by the end of the year.
Of course.
But
and everybody knows that. But does that
knows.
translate into war?
Not necessarily war, because the situation in Lebanon is not that we are going to wage a war against Hezbollah. We are going to wage more powerful pressure on them. And we, by the way, the amount of attacks we carry out in Lebanon is growing steadily because Hezbollah is rebuilding their capabilities. So we have to make sure that we run faster than they do. But this is creating the conditions, or will hopefully create the conditions that would enable the Lebanese government to take the necessary steps, maybe not immediately, but somewhere in the future. As long as this is agreed by everybody besides Hezbollah and Iran, that Hezbollah has to disarm, it's a good development. And we have to remember, Hezbollah doesn't have any logic to explain why it keeps these weapons in its possession. There's no justification for that.
Right. Because it says, on the one hand, you hear the leader of Hezbollah saying, we're willing to disarm south of the Litani, but if that's the case, towards who are you maintaining all those weapons, if not against Israel?
They claim they are the
narrative.
Shield of Lebanon against Israel. This is nonsense.
That is nonsense. We don't have very much time left, but nonetheless, I think it's important to ask you about the Lebanese correlation with Hamas's refusal to disarm, something that is now also pushed for by Qatar and the Turks, who are trying to salvage the terrorist organization Hamas and to maintain its power to a certain degree. Does that put a stop to President Trump's 20-point plan for the Gaza Strip and his hopes and declarations of peace in the Middle East?
Well, I'm not saying that it's putting in hold, but it's making it much more difficult to move forward. And definitely President Trump wants to see us move into stage 2 of the plan. But moving forward without disarming Hamas makes it a really strange situation, because the purpose of everything in the plan was to disarm Hamas in order to create a better future for the Palestinians in Gaza and for Israel, so that Israel could be safe and secured. Israel is not going to be safe and secure as long as Hamas is there rebuilding its capabilities. The ethos of that explains the raison d'etre of Hamas remains the same. They are there in order to annihilate Israel. And we cannot afford letting them rebuild their capabilities. Just even with the perimeter, they are still extremely close to the Israeli communities along the border with Gaza. This makes no sense. So we have to make sure that when we move to the next stage, Hamas is disarmed. Now, we know that the chances that Turkey or Qatar or anybody who's going to man the International Stabilization Force is going to disarm Hamas by force is less than zero. So it means that we should have to do that. And I think that explains why this coming visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu in the United States is so critical, because we need to come out of there with a clear message from the Americans that if Hamas is not going to disarm by its own will, then Israel is going to get the green light to do that by force. And that's the most important thing, and this may pave the road for moving along the plan and making the Middle East a much better place.
Indeed. Not to forget, of course, we still have one hostage, the remains of one hostage, an Israeli police officer who was brutally killed on October 7th of 2023. Since then, the Islamist Hamas continues to keep the remains of this hostage and have yet to return him to Israel. This, of course, cannot be, and Israel must stand on its demand not to move to the second phase until all hostages are returned, including the very last one of them.
Right.
Now, General, in 2-3 sentences, what should we focus on for the next week? I know we are ahead of Christmas. It's a time of hope, a time of optimism. What should we focus on?
Well, first of all, we have to continue foiling the attempts of our enemies to ruin the day for us, like they did in Sydney. This is something that we have to be focused on first and foremost. There are so many of them who are contemplating to carry out more attacks. We have to be on alert. Secondly, we have to use the time in order to put more pressure on our enemies, both in Gaza and in Lebanon, and prepare in this way to the meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump right after Christmas, between Christmas and the beginning of the new year. And this is where the decisions are going to be taken that would affect the future of the Middle East. It's an extremely important meeting. We should be well prepared to that. And all our efforts should be concentrated in convincing the Americans that we need their support in doing what we have to finish the job that we've begun before. It's very demanding, but we still are committed to make it happen.
This is also an American interest, in my point of view.
That's what we have to explain to them.
General Kuperwasser, thank you very much for all of your time and your insights.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of you at home as well, wishing you here from Jerusalem a happy Hanukkah as well as a Merry Christmas. Until our next edition, Shalom.